Okay, I'm going to continue and get this over and done with, then we can work on your essays. That would be more important. So I've been talking about what the digital has done, whether or not things have changed. I stress again, this is my jaundiced opinion. For me, I'm saying perhaps there is nothing for you to think about. I'm suggesting you think. Question my judgment. I want to say perhaps there is nothing new in all of this hype about the digital. We are asked to buy commodities, and we're in a situation where global capital is in slump. Nothing much is moving. So unless you mean new as in what happened when the printing press expanded access to literacy to everyone, or something like that, then new media doesn't strike me as that new. Or when television moved into everyone's homes. Was that not a bigger change than when writing letters turned into digital? I mean, in some ways, the telephone, which we think of as an older technology to everything else that this device does, the telephone was much faster than email. The way in which you use email or text messaging maybe is different, but with the telephone, if I call you and you answer, we speak straight away. With email, I send you an email and you ignore it. You leave it lying in your inbox box if it doesn't go to spam, or you delete it. You are in a slower mode of communication rather than a faster one. Right? And we choose to text rather than phone quite often now. At least I do. So that for me makes me wonder if the hype of new media and speed is not just a kind of marketing device to make you feel excited about media. Have a chat outside. Think of the change that happened to families when television arrived inside the house, or before that radio, or photography, or books. 600 years ago, books were only available to priests in the church, to the king, to the emperor, largely. Okay, yeah, there were logbooks and so on, and ships and so on. But mass distribution of books, that was a massive change. That's a new media. So what does it mean for anthropology? I think the density of our relationships changing, that matters for anthropology, but fieldwork shouldn't change because of that. And the same applies to digitization. The extension and dissection of information into smaller and smaller units that can be monetized, sure, that's something like a change in production. And we can talk about Taylorism or Toyotaism, just-in-time delivery of components that are assembled in several countries at once. That's a change in the way in which production proceeds. And so also we can use that metaphor to understand anthropological fieldwork as also happening in a series of smaller pieces. There is actually a discussion in anthropology of multi-sided fieldwork. Instead of doing your fieldwork all in one place, you do it in a range of different places, different components on the same thing. But we need to think about this in terms of what it's doing to how we work. And actually, I'm really taken by, last night I was watching a lecture by Gayatri Spivak, as you do, and I'm really taken by a point she made, and I've added that at the end here for this, thinking about the digital. She was very critical of the digital humanities. So it seems like a sensible, a little bit shocking, but you know, I'm happy about that, but then not shocking at all. Event, right? She is against what's happened with the digital humanities. She says it's a hoax. Now, she was at the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, the foundation for research that's named after Rosa Luxemburg, which is not in the tradition of Rosa Luxemburg necessarily, but a little bit. They've certainly funded some good people, and I know they've done some good work, but I think Rosa Luxemburg would have pushed them a bit harder. But in that environment, Spivak maybe changed her argument for them. The lecture is amazing, but she talked about the digital humanities as being damaging. How is the digital damaging us in the way in which we do fieldwork or research? The digital humanities, she says, it's not the humanities. That's an interesting and provocative idea. Now, when Spivak says something, there are so many different levels at which she's trying to push us. She really thinks how her words get taken. I like to think, you know, I get some of it, not all of it, and not all in all the way, but in this one, I think what she's saying is the problem is that the digital humanities, the digital is problematic because it's quantifying what we do. And in the same way that everything is being monetized, turned into measurable units, so that your phone calls are measured by the second and turned into something you have to pay for, so also is the problem that the humanities are digitized and quantified, because that's not what they are, not what critically thinking about culture, learning to read is not something you can do through quantification. Now, I have this idea that she has in mind those people in the social sciences that are doing deep data scrubbing, right? Digital scrubbing, scraping information from large data sets. That's a technical and, yeah, maybe even interesting thing. But the humanities is learning how to handle those data sets. An ethical and moral, perhaps, way of reading and contextualizing and understanding, studying and understanding. And if you're reading in a way that quantifies and calculates, so I think of this as like reading with a search engine open, or even a translation machine. We are being dumbed down a little bit by that. Now, okay, we also need that. I'm not saying, because like trying to read Ting Viet things, I need the translation machine. But I see actually that it makes me a bit lazy as well if I read through that machine. Because to understand, to study and then understand that text, I need to be fluent in the language. The same for English for you, I'm sure. You must know that the reading experience of reading, I don't know, Moby Dick or something like that is very different when you can immerse yourself into reading the book and feel its rhythms of language rather than having to translate every sentence. Now, there are some that are using these search engines to be able to quickly assemble material for publication on any topic. searching through the work, the digitized work of all of Marx to find mentions of the family or value or something like that, rather than reading the whole argument, rather than having the wherewithal to comprehend that Marx is setting out an unfolding argument, and that a search engine looking for keywords cannot pull out an argument. It can only pull out the mentions of the keywords. It can't show the development of an argument. So digital anthropology, we must engage with the digital, but in some level it's de-skilling us if we don't watch out for the ways in which it's turning relationships into a calculus. All right, yeah, sure, digital objects are new and different, they're digital. But to the extent that the digital humanities thinks, it needs to think about the way in which it changes those objects away from study and understand. Because what you do with this machine life is up to you. I think this is one point we can understand today, that reading with or trying to write something, I don't know, say you want to write about Marx and Time, a possible topic. I know I've written about Marx and Time, right? So you could go onto the Marx Engels Internet Archive and search for every moment where Marx mentions time and put that into an essay. It might look really good. But do you understand how Marx understood time in production? I mean, he has a whole book that talks about, second volume of Capital, talks about the circuits of production and how there are different times of production running at the same time. If you took out every mention of time and assembled them in a whole list of all the things that Marx said about time, you wouldn't understand that argument. You would have all the sentences where he talked about time, but you wouldn't understand how he was making a case for there being concurrent multiple times of production. His argument, that's what we are in need of understanding. All right, so what is an argument becomes the question then. Let me just go to something else. I want to take up someone's final, in the last part of each lecture, for the next few weeks, I want to take up someone's project and take it apart and put it back together on the board as an example. Let me stop sharing even. Okay, so I'm hoping one of you is brave enough to volunteer to use the blackboard with me. Moving, yes. To work through an essay. Do you have someone who would like to do this? It will help you in your writing, I hope. You ready? You are the only one reaching for your bag, so come on then, come up. I'm going to turn that off too. Here's the device. Can anyone see the little remote control for that thing? All right, we can use the board. Okay, welcome. Who is your chosen anthropologist? Levi Strauss, Claude Levi Strauss. Okay, let's put his name on the board. It's not called Huen in. Is that Huen in Ting Viet? In Ting Viet, what is that called? Queen?
Yes.
Yeah, Sac. It's not called Sac in French, but yeah, different. Okay, Claude Levi Strauss. And okay, do you have a plan already?
Coronavirus.
Coronavirus. Okay, cool. Let's write that down. I'll help you as well.
Yes.
Corona. No, it's not corona. It's all right, corona. All right, so virus. And Levi Strauss. You can suggest ideas if you have suggestions for him. What are your key ideas? Let's use this part of the board. We've got corona. What else?
Maintain population.
Population. Maintain what? Because maintain their health or the numbers? When you say maintenance, right, we could mean, just so I understand, do you mean the how many people or do you mean the health of many people? Health. Okay. And?
Because he says the ethnic in the population of ethnic is very low, 1%, and that's the reason why they don't affect simple corona.
What is 1%? I'm not understanding. What something is 1%? What's that?
He keep the pollution close one.
The reproduction
Yeah.
level, reproduction rate of population is which way? This way.
Yes.
Right. That means, does that mean it's more than 1% of virus? All right, so we want the virus there. Okay.
Yes.
What else is important for this?
I want to talk about if the word apply this way for coronavirus, maybe we can slow down the increase of corona.
Infection rate?
Yes.
Yeah. So infection rate, and we want to have success. And there are things that we have to do to keep this rate. So you would talk about masks, checking, testing, things like that you can do to create success. Okay, so we're talking about the coronavirus and the idea of keeping infection rates below 1% that will stop it from spreading. Okay, now if it's above 1%, you have crisis, right? And the graphs will go up like that, right? Below 1%, your graph will be like that, or maybe like that, something like that. Okay, now, what you've learned from Levi-Strauss, because the idea is that you will use the style of research of your chosen anthropologist to think about the topic of your interest. Now, Levi-Strauss might not help us. It's an experiment. Can Levi-Strauss's style of work help us think about this? What are your ideas so far?
You must respect your cultural ethnic when you work.
An ethnicity or cultural relativism or cultural respect. Cultural respect or respect for ethnicity. So this is his stuff from like Tropics and things like that, from Tropics. Where you look around the world and each culture has a different organization, and that will obviously be a factor in getting them to wear masks or something, okay? Yeah, okay. What else?
We, the structure of
You want to use his structural analysis, okay? Structuralism of some mythologies or something, and then to use it somehow like this. How do you see that working? Still looking, yeah, okay, I understand. All right, so let's think a bit more about structural analysis, and you can suggest as well. If anyone is reading Levi-Strauss, or you remember what Levi-Strauss, in the lecture about Levi-Strauss, what that was about, how would we then think about Levi-Strauss's structural analysis for this topic? What does he do? Levi-Strauss takes a myth, right? And he looks at various patterns. He looks at patterns and oppositions. A is opposed to B, C is opposed to D. So D is to B as A is to C, something like this kind of thing. And cutting through this is a E, F resolution or something. There's a mechanism in the thought of a story, a myth, that for him tells us something. Okay, I can understand that COVID and the issue of solving COVID is also a story. You can think of, maybe we can think of, there are so many factors you have to make allowances for, but the story or the several stories about COVID, about Corona, could be like several versions of a myth. What are the versions we have? One version is that in China there was a lab and they, I don't know, ate some monkeys or something, right? And it escaped to the population. There are other stories that say Vietnam was successful because the government was good at tracking. Then stories elsewhere, government was not good at tracking in America, they pretended it didn't exist. Or Trump, who wants to get elected next week. Do you know that the American election is next week? It's a bit shocking. 1 week to go. Trump wants to get elected, so he did something with one version of COVID, okay? So we have several different stories. And the stories say COVID is real, COVID is not real, right? It's not dangerous or something like that. COVID is from China, it's China's fault. COVID is the US's fault, or Boris Johnson in England, because the government looked for a herd mentality. You heard that story? So the UK one, Boris Johnson said, we're not going to do anything about it because we want our population to become herd immunity, not mentality, well, it was a herd mentality. Everyone was a sheep if they believed him. They wanted to get everyone, as many people infected as quickly as possible so that they would then develop immunity. Didn't work. Sweden. Okay, so immunity was one. And infection rate, this is more like science, right? It's science, but it's based on taking action. So these are the actions, and this was non-action. Okay, anything else that's significant for this? What do you think? Now we need to make an analysis. We need to do a structural analysis. What are the keys? So, cultural respect is one. Doing nothing, doing something. That's an opposition, right? Doing nothing, doing something is a structural opposition. So some stories have us do nothing, some stories have us do something. Now, some cultural groups will take action, some will not because of their past history. Actually, do you know why Vietnam was able to do so much so quickly? Why? We prepared and had previous experience because of bird flu. Right, bird flu. When was bird flu? 2002 or something like that. So Vietnam had experience of that, and so it knew when it saw another one coming, we should do this. Right. So the cultural group were prepared. Whereas this cultural group, run by the conservative Boris Johnson, some people might disagree with this, but he was more interested in protecting business and economy and short term, whereas the culture of Vietnam is to think about the people, the national effort, everyone. The culture of the UK government was to think about big business first. Okay, so there's an option that tells us at least one story. Opposition between be prepared, preparation, and reaction. So UK was reaction. Both are reactions, but one reaction is quick. The other one was the whole population safety, business environment, keep business open. So there's also the opposition between close the economy and keep it open. Right? The UK wanted to keep the company open. Vietnam was ready to close it to protect everyone. So the structural oppositions, open, closed, prepare, react. What else? I think also herd immunity versus bird flu. These are mythic animals, right? Levi Strauss loves stories about animals, and in this one we have three kinds of animals. We also have, where would we put it? China. They have the monkeys. right? Or bats. Bats, it was bats, not monkeys, was it? I don't know why they call monkeys. Sorry, bat. So you've got three mythic images in the stories, and you've got some opposition. And another cutting across, another one is herd, the herd of animals all going together, and then the individual bat that infected or the herd, one animal, and so it's the story of this one animal affecting the herd, but it's also the opportunism of those who would think about big business versus action. Right. Maybe there's further we could go on this, but we kind of have a map of what the stories are and what we can say about the stories. Now you have to put it into an argument. All of this we can say, but what is the most convincing order? Or what's the way to convince everyone that Levi Strauss's way of talking about COVID is worth it? What do you think is the most important point? Anyone? What do you think is the most important point he's got? About the population, that the orientation was to protect the people rather than business? That one? You mean this? Maybe? What do you think? Okay. Like population here, we're talking about the people versus the capitalists. Yeah, okay, so your first sentence will be something around that. It's the commitment of Vietnam to protect everyone, the whole population, that was most important. All right? So that then gives you a way to talk about the rest. Because the focus was on population, and the people believed the government, they were able to introduce and get people to agree to testing, to wearing masks. I mean, everyone wore masks, not so much now, but at the start, yeah, everyone wore masks. So, not like a herd, but everyone. There's a kind of opposition there. Everyone took the action of doing what was best for the population. So, population agreed to act, and the government was trusted. Whereas in the UK, the other example, the government acted to protect business, and the public didn't follow any of the required things. The counterexample. All right. What was most important in this? When we look from outside, we need to look at not cultural respect, but the specific culture of Vietnam was that people would be willing to do this. The specific culture of the UK is that people were not willing to follow Boris. Although Boris got sick himself, and then people did follow. He sacrificed himself. So you would have an example about cultural prepare. Right? And give Vietnam and UK as examples. And maybe the US as well. They're slightly different. UK and Vietnam are almost opposed. US is a different case because they were prepared, but they were hiding. I don't know. Trump knew that it was an issue. So this one would be one, and it leads to this question of which action. Now you also have to explain all of this about science. It's interesting that Boris said he had science advisors that advised him on this as well, but they chose not to go through this path. So, science or not? To follow the science or to follow the interests of business pretending to use the science? And you can talk about 1% versus herd immunity. Then you talk about track and trace. And here, I mean, they didn't do track and trace. They didn't even order masks. Or they ordered some cheap masks from Italy and they didn't come, and all sorts of examples. Unprepared. Why? Cultural preparedness, science. What's the third thing? I think you want here to talk about how these oppositions of structuralism, and Levy Strauss, talk about him, show us how to understand different responses to COVID. Right? So there are different responses to COVID, and we understand why one is successful, because their myth story about the bird flu and how their orientation towards the people and so on. So we talk about myths and animals. Allowed them to do it. Whereas here, their animal, they didn't really have an animal except the big business animal and the herd mentality. They were, when we say a herd mentality or herd immunity, we're thinking of a flock of dumb animals. So a smart response to animals, a dumb response to animals. So, Levi-Strauss's structural analysis and his approach to culture helps us understand the difference between various responses, VN UK. Science, business opposition, business opening. Science and willing to accept short loss. Willing to accept deaths. Basically, that's what the UK did. They said, right, in order to keep business going, some of our community, the herd, will die, and we accept it. Whereas in Vietnam, no one should die, let the economy suffer a bit. I mean, partly that's possible because Vietnam already had a strong economy. England did not. They were, you know, close to losing everything. They were panicking, maybe. Okay, but you can talk about that. You kind of have an argument. Goes from culture to science to analysis. With increasing analysis, we get a deeper understanding of how important having the population support is. That's using Levi-Strauss's style of work to understand your topic. It can work. Yeah. Do you think anything else? Say a little more. I'm going to rub this off. You want to keep it? Got? Okay. When you say economic competition, do you mean that as a topic you want to come on up? Okay, economic competition is your thing, right?
We got 65 points.
Oh, you've got it here. Can I have a quick reminder? So also Levi Strauss,
Yeah.
Economic Life.
Here's one I have read on the book, Anthropology confront with the problem of the modern life.
Okay, 65 is good. What are you talking about? Anyway, all right. So we're again looking at Levi Strauss, but also economy. And for Levi Strauss, what's really important is the difference between the political economy or the economics of profit, and for him, cultural factors, which will say be about status. Yeah? What else? Is anyone else doing Levi Strauss as well? You're also doing Levi Strauss, so what do you remember about him talking about economy? I confess I don't remember, but we'll have some stuff here. Let's take it from here. Okay. Let's say there's social structure. Prestige is the word you used. Here's using the work of Mauss, right? And of course, Mauss is using Malinowski. I mean, there's also Durkheim and others, right? But the crucial thing that they bring here is gift economy, which is about status or prestige, prestation, giving gifts. And the question is here is really, can the economic laws and thinking about the economy apply to all social life. And Malinowski is the one for us who shows us that, okay, when you look at the Trobrianders, they're doing all this exchange, and it's all about prestige, but really underneath there is a sensible economy of trade. Levy just somehow turns it around and says the structure is always there. A structure of exchange upon which culture is based. So you get, I don't know, faith, food, class, education, technology, yes, stories. All these things are somehow women, right? His first book, big book, The Elementary Structures of Kinship, was about using women as an exchange, right? Feminists hated that. Fair enough, yeah, but, right, so this is his point, but then there's economic theory. And even Marxism, something like that, talks about how economic interests shape this so-called superstructure. I mean, Marx only uses that in one small introduction to the critique of political economy for a book that he didn't write. But nonetheless, there's a base and superstructure. In Marx. Now, one separate interesting question might be, to what extent is Levi-Strauss a Marxist in his structure? I mean, he does say that whenever he went to write something, getting ready to write something, he would get ready by reading a little bit from Marx from the 18th Brumaire, like as an exercise before he wrote something. So he was very influenced by Marx. But that doesn't mean that his structure is the same as Marx's structure, even though you can see some similarity if exchange is the basis, but status and prestige is shaping for Levi-Strauss more than profit and equivalence, right? The whole premise of rational economics is that we exchange equivalence. I'll give you this bit of chalk if you give me one dong, right? That's an exchange of equivalence because chalk is worth one dong. It's not, but yeah, it's a myth. Okay? All right, so how do we work this out? All right, so I think one way might be exactly to take up this question. Is Levi-Strauss influenced by Marx in his idea of structure? All right. I would look at an essay by Jacques Derrida called Structure, Sign and Play. It's in a book called Writing and Difference. And in that book, in that chapter, Derrida talks about Levi-Strauss's idea of structure, and that the structure for Derrida is something like, it's solid in Levi-Strauss. But what's wrong with that for Derrida is that really it's always moving. There's always play in the sign. There's always movement. So the structure cannot stand up by itself somehow, right? So one thing we might say is that economic thinking that doesn't take into account culture is too abstract, is too technical. It's like too technical or formal. Right? To build a structure, it's like this. Right? And it doesn't fall down. Whereas a structure that takes play into account and time and change and movement and culture and all of that cannot be that solid. It's much more flexible. And that's a better description of reality. Right? Now, all that's well and good. That's your background. Your interest, is it in economic theory? That's the thing that you want to bring this to, right? Is it? That's your kind of example. Well, I don't know so much about economic theory, but we can talk about someone like who are you choosing as an economic theorist, for example? Who would you choose as an economic theorist, as an example, or economic theory? Well, there are so many. So we could pick Ricardo or Smith, Adam Smith. Yeah, the hidden hand. Oh, yeah, Adam Smith, you like? All right. Well, we put Adam Smith up here. All right. Hidden hand. He talks about the hidden hand of. Adam Smith is for competition. He doesn't want there to be monopolies for many competitors. Right? And he thinks that then, because of the drive for profit and the rule of equivalence, the hidden hand of equivalence of drive will make the economy work. Levi Strauss will stress so many other factors. Okay? What is your best point? All right, you want to talk about that as well? Competition between China and US. What are the main factors here? Trade war. Technology and tariffs. And
the effect on the environment.
the effect on the environment. Okay. So, in the US case, we don't see much care for the environment. In fact, we have climate denial. Can you say the same of China, or do you think China pays more attention to the environment? And yet they are building big dams on the Mekong, which are destructive of the environment. But yes, okay. So we can talk about an opposition between environment, China cares, and US climate deny. Now, I don't know whether it's true or not, but some people will say that China is trying to get worldwide reputation, prestige, status by being the one that cares about the environment, working in Africa to do, right? So it's about status and prestige through enviro. Whereas, and this is a bit of a simplification, the US is trying to get world status and prestige through business, through saying we are the greatest economy of the world, right? So if you turn up late and be disruptive, I'd rather you didn't even come. Gotcha? So what do you think is his best point? Help him out. What's his best point? Yeah. Tick, 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 tick. What's he got here? We got a lot of things. They try and break it into sections. Prestige, you say? Okay, yeah, I can see that. So the economic battle that defines the world right now is the question of prestige. All right, let's see if we can organize all this in relation to that. Obviously, it's the environment versus this is competition. Right, then we want what Levi Strauss has to bring to this, which is a critique of those economic theories because they don't pay attention to culture, that exchange and structure are really important. This is an issue, the base superstructure thing and the structure and Derrida. I say you need to explore these two things a bit more. So these are just ideas, but I have a feeling that they are going to be key. And the background of this is actually this one. Okay, so Levi Strauss's idea of prestige and cultural dimensions comes from Malinowski and from this gift economy stuff. The gift economy is a way of getting prestige. The Chinese are gifting technologies to Africa and so on to try and get world prestige. Yeah. All right, so what is the direction of your argument? You probably want to say in this section that Levi Strauss and gift economy, etc. Gift economy and structure, spell all that out. Then there is an opposition between economic theory and exchange culture theory. Gift, of which the Marx and Derrida plus Marx and Derrida, because why I add them in, I'm just adding them there and we haven't worked through it. I think they challenge these two the simple opposition between superstructure and exchange cultural thing and the economic theory thing. But then the trade war as battle for prestige. Levy Strauss can help us understand global postures. I don't know, I'm calling them postures because I think it's actually hype, it's propaganda, because neither is China as generous or as committed to environment as they say they are. They're building these huge dams on the Mekong and it's hurting Vietnam. But the US, their economic theory is not as good, right? They say they're all about the economy, but actually they're about tariffs and protection. But that can help us. Levi Strauss can help us understand that too. So Levi Strauss's work helps in these areas: understanding exchange, understanding environment, responses, and competition as a game of prestige seeking, or propaganda, I say. But we can develop the structural analysis further. With Derrida and Marx. All right, you might not do that, but that's how I will do it. So what is your overall argument? You're saying if we start with Levi-Strauss and the gift economy we learned from Marx and so on, we can understand the competition between the US and China and the difference between an economic theory about hidden hand and competition and so on, versus structural, superstructural prestige environment. But there's also something else going on where the critiques of Levi-Strauss by Derrida and the lack of specificity of his Marxism give us an even more elaborate explanation of what is going on in the prestige battles between the US and China. I think this is too big an issue to write just a 1,500-word essay. The background reading is too big, but you can simplify it a little bit, all right? So you're just going to say, if we try to understand the battles between the US and China over technology and environment through Levi-Strauss, by looking at the gift economy, status and prestige, and then structure, we can get a clearer idea, but not the final. You don't have to explain everything. You just say that it can help us look at what they are trying to do. And that will be enough. That will be enough. I think, what do you need to do? You need to get a clearer statement of what economic theory, like, I know how to define classic or economic theory. Find a clear statement about what Levi-Strauss says about prestige. I'd like you to read the Derrida essay. I don't know whether they're talking about Marx and base superstructure, but that's in the Introduction to Political Economy, Introduction to a Critique of Political Economy. The background to Marx and Malinowski, that's very easy and quick. So I think they're things to do, and then think about this direction of the argument. That still needs a bit more work. What to read for economic theory? I think something from Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. You find it in the first chapter probably. And yeah, can work. Does that make any sense? Yeah, I'll take a photo of that. All right, let's do one that's not Levi Strauss. Okay, someone? Oh, have we not got time? What's the time? We've got time. 4 minutes to go. Next time. That's not Levi Strauss, someone who's Malinowski, and I think it should be one of you two. Since you like to talk. So bring it. And anyone else who wants to next time? Yeah, you can, sure. And work out what we're doing. Of course, you can do it with each other. Get together with a friend and try and do the same thing at home on your own time as well. It will help. It's just a matter of thinking it through. What is the connection, the logical connection between economic theory and what Levi Strauss says? What is the connection between your topic and what your chosen anthropologist will say? Okay, thank you very much. See you. Do you have a question? Do you have a question? Putting your hand up. Thank you. And that's it for today, this morning. Thanks.